Lamborghini Aventador SV is not just a car. It's an event, a symphony of power, design, and raw emotion. When it arrives, it doesn't simply move through the air. It cuts through it, leaving behind the unmistakable sound of 12 cylinders singing in perfect harmony. This is not transportation. This is theater. The Aventador SV, or super veloce, meaning super fast in Italian, represents the purest expression of Lamborghini's DNA. Power, performance, and passion without compromise. It's a machine built not to follow trends, but to redefine them. The story of the Aventador begins with a challenge. In 2011, Lamborghini set out to create a car that would push the boundaries of what a V12 supercar could be. The world was changing. Technology was evolving. Competitors were turning to turbochargers and hybrid systems. But Lamborghini decided to stay true to its heart, the naturally aspirated V12, a masterpiece of mechanical art that connects directly to the soul. The standard Aventador was already astonishing. But in 2015, Lamborghini unveiled something even more extreme, the Aventador LP750-4 Super Veloce. It was lighter, louder, sharper, and far more aggressive. Every detail was engineered for one purpose: pure speed. The numbers tell part of the story. A 6.5-liter naturally aspirated V12 engine, producing 750 horsepower and 690 newton-meters of torque. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in just 2.8 seconds. A top speed of over 350 kilometers per hour. But statistics alone can't capture what it feels like to drive one. When you start the Aventador SV, the world around you changes. The V12 awakens with a roar that seems to come from the earth itself. The sound is not digital, not filtered. It's raw, alive, and primal. Every vibration, every gear change, every echo bouncing off the walls tells you that this is something extraordinary. The design of the Aventador SV looks like it was sculpted by speed itself. Sharp lines, massive air intakes, and an aggressive rear wing all serve a purpose. Downforce, cooling, stability, everything is functional, yet breathtakingly beautiful. The body is built from carbon fiber reinforced polymer, reducing weight by over 50 kilograms compared to the standard Aventador. It's not just a car that looks fast. It's a car that is fast in every sense. Inside, the cockpit feels like a fighter jet. The start button hides beneath a red flip cover, as if you're about to launch a missile. Alcantara, carbon fiber, and minimalist design remind you that this is not luxury for comfort. It's luxury for performance. Everything inside exists to serve the driver. The SV is all-wheel drive with a 7-speed ISR transmission, independent shifting rods that changes gears in just 50 milliseconds. It's brutally fast, almost violent, but that's part of the experience. You don't just drive the Aventador SV, you wrestle with it, and it rewards you with sensations that few cars on Earth can deliver. On a track, the Aventador SV feels like a wild animal set free. The steering is heavy but precise. The brakes, carbon ceramic, bite hard and fast. Every input, every motion, connects the driver directly to the machine. It's not a car for everyone. It demands respect and skill. But for those who understand it, the reward is pure adrenaline. Lamborghini's engineers didn't just want more power. They wanted more emotion. That's why the SV is one of the most unforgettable exhaust notes ever created. At full throttle, the V12 screams to 8,500 revolutions per minute, echoing like an orchestra of thunder and fire. It's the sound of Italian passion turned into motion. Only 600 units of the Aventador SV were ever made, making it a rare gem in the automotive world. Each one was hand-built in Sant'Agata Bolognese, Italy, where Lamborghini has crafted its legend since 1963. Every SV carries the spirit of the Raging Bull, the company's symbol of strength and defiance. Beyond its raw power, the Aventador SV represents a moment in time, the final era of the pure, naturally aspirated V12 supercar. No turbos, no hybrids, no compromises. Just power, air, and fire. In a world moving rapidly toward electrification, The SV stands as a monument to mechanical emotion. When you see an Aventador SV on the road, you don't just notice it, you feel it. The stance, the sound, the way light dances across its sharp edges. It commands attention, but it doesn't ask for it. It simply takes it. Every curve, every angle, every roar tells a story. The story of Lamborghini's relentless pursuit of perfection through passion. Drivers who have experienced the Aventador SV often describe it not as driving a car, but as flying low to the ground. It's intoxicating, overwhelming, and addictive. Each acceleration feels like a launch, each corner a test of bravery. The SV doesn't forgive mistakes, but it rewards courage. What makes it special is not just its speed, but its soul. Many supercars are faster on paper, more advanced, more comfortable, but none of them feel quite like this. The Aventador SV is a reminder that emotion cannot be measured in numbers. It lives in the way your hands tighten on the wheel, the way your heart races when the revs climb, the way the world blurs when you shift into the next gear. Over the years, Lamborghini has built many icons: the Miura, the Countach, the Diablo, the Murcielago. Each represented the spirit of its time. But the Aventador SV is something else. It's a modern classic that bridges past and future. It carries the rawness of old Lamborghinis with the technology of a new era. In 2018, Lamborghini introduced the Aventador SVJ, an even more extreme evolution that would go on to set records at the Nürburgring. But for purists, the SV remains the most balanced expression, the perfect blend of madness and control. As the automotive world moves towards silent electric power, the Aventador SV stands like a defiant roar in the night, the last of its kind. It reminds us why we fell in love with cars in the first place. Not because they move us from place to place, but because they move something deep inside us. The Lamborghini Aventador SV is not just about speed or performance. It's about presence, about emotion, about the connection between man and machine. It's about chasing perfection, knowing you might never reach it, but loving the pursuit anyway. When the V12 fades and silence returns, one truth remains: the Aventador SV is not just a car. It's a masterpiece of sound, design, and soul. A symbol of what happens when passion meets engineering, without limits. The world will keep evolving, engines will go quiet, and technology will take over. But the roar of the Aventador SV will never be forgotten, because legends don't die,